Hi friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me in my craft room today for a Pretty Pink Posh video. I'm continuing my box card series, so I have my scallop box card dies as well as sentiment strip dies. I'll be using the dad from the Hot Foil Large Dad Father plates as well as the coordinating shadow die. I'm going to be stamping those adorable little cats from the brand new baby animal stamp set and coordinating dies, and also I'll be using the decorative hexagon stamp set. It does have a coordinating die, but we will not be using it for this project. I went ahead and die cut my scallop box card, just the base, out of some blue cardstock, and I foiled my dad's sentiment and cut it out. I'm going to move on to stamping my adorable cats, so let's go ahead and get some alcohol marker friendly white cardstock into my little Misty, and I'm going to be stamping it with a black ink that is also alcohol marker friendly. I also will be bringing in the Sentiment Strips birthday stamp set later on when I work on my sentiment. I just thought about it when I was building my sentiment later on in this video. So I did stamp my cat about three times to make sure that I had a nice clean impression. Some of the whiskers didn't show up perfectly, but I'm going to fix that later on when I'm done coloring. So let me clean up my desk. I'll go ahead and zoom in here so we can see the coloring, and I'm going to be using my Ohuhu alcohol markers in the Honolulu. I like the bees because there is a brush and a nib, and I'm going to be coloring my cats in a calico cat kind of look. I'm just going to use an orangey color. So I'm starting with my darkest shade, and I'm using E260. Again, these are Ohuhu art markers, and I'm just creating where I think my orange spots would look nice on my cats. So just creating shadow right where those orange spots are going to be. For my mid-tone, I'm bringing in Y180, and I'm just going to bring out that darkest shade just a bit. Again, still creating shadow on my cats while lightening up the color and creating those fun little orange spots. Now, I am allergic to cats, so I don't really care for cats, but my daughter is currently obsessed with them, so I thought this would be really fun to create my Father's Day card with the cats for her, and I just thought that she would really like how this box card turned out. For the lightest color of these orange spots on my cat, I'm using Y140, and again, just bringing out those darkest shades and creating those fun, warm, kind of orangey yellow spots on my cats. I really don't have any rhyme or reason to how these cats are looking. I'm just adding them where I think it would look cute on the cat. That's how I do most of my coloring, is if I just think it looks cute. So I'll go ahead and finish adding in those spots on my largest cat, and then I will move on to my smaller little kiddo cat. For the white parts of the cat, just to add a little bit of shadow, I'm using a warm gray. So this is WG 0.5, and I'm just going where I think there would be shadow on the cats on the white parts of the cat. I'm going to bring back in my Y180, which was the mid-tone, and just add a few little kind of fun spots. I like to do this sometimes for critters just to give them a little bit more cartoon look, and I'll bring back in that warm gray to add a few spots on the white areas as well. I started with using E030 as my pink for the ears and nose and little cheeks for my cats, but I don't think it's bright enough, so I'm going to bring in a second color, which is R21, and just go back over those cheeks, and then I will use the nib part to add a little bit of shadow to the ears and nose just to darken them up a bit. Now I'm taking a fine liner black pen and just tracing the whiskers that didn't turn out perfectly, and it just darkens them up a little bit. And now I'm taking a white gel pen and I'm adding little highlights to my cats as well as the cheeks. I also like to use a white gel pen to color anywhere where I went out of the line. It's a great way to make those little tiny spots outside of the lines disappear. Once I'm all done with my highlights, I'll go ahead and zoom back out, and then I will use the coordinating die from the baby animals coordinating dies and cut them out. They turned out so cute, and I think Abigail, my daughter, is really going to love them. Moving on to the second part of my sentiment, I'm going to use the medium-sized dies. So I use the scalloped out of some blue sparkly cardstock, the rectangle out of some teal cardstock, and the really thin rectangle out of white so I can stamp my sentiment. I'm going to grab the It's Your Special Day from that birthday stamp set, and I'm going to line it up in my Misty with the negative piece of my die cut, so that way I can make sure my sentiment looks straight and centered before I add in my piece of paper. So I got the sentiment onto the Misty, and then I'm adding my paper, and I'll grab some blue ink. This is Fiesta Blue from Catherine Pooler, and just inking out my sentiment and go ahead and stamp it on that white strip. I'll go ahead and set it aside with all the rest of my die cuts that I have been collecting for this card. Now for the fun part, and probably the most complex part, I'm going to create my own pattern paper background that will fit all of my scallop pieces. So I have a piece of white cardstock, and I'm just going to figure out how much I need to actually stamp on this white cardstock to create my background and have plenty of room for all of these die cut pieces. So I have two different what I call the shelf pieces of my box cards. So I want to make sure I have room for two of those rectangles. And I'm just taking a pen and outlining where I can cut my paper so I don't have to stamp more than I need to. So I just did a really rough drawing, and so I'm going to use my scissors and just cut that out. I left plenty of room so I can make sure I have lots of area for my die cuts once I'm all done stamping. I'm going to have to use my larger Misty for this one because it is a large piece of white cardstock, and I get it into my Misty. And then I'm going to take all of the medium-sized hexagons from this stamp set. I'm going to create my own pattern and fitting each of these hexagons next to each other, which is really easy to do since they are the same size and they all have straight edges that you can line them up next to each other. So here I am forgetting how hexagons nest with each other, and there you go, I moved it down. And I'm going to fit all four of these onto my background or my white cardstock. So once I have my first four, or the only four, but my first pattern set, I'll go ahead and pick up the stamps with my Misty, and my paper will move slightly, but that's okay. I'm going to place it back correctly and straight in my Misty, make sure the stamps still look good, and then I'm going to grab some additional magnets. Since I have two Misties, I have lots of magnets, so I can make sure everything will stay in place while I stamp. I'm going to just use one color for all four of these stamps. I am going to do die cutting, and a lot of my hexagons will be covered when I put the card together. So using the same colors constantly in a row and right next to each other are perfectly fine for me, but you could also mix it up by stamping each of these hexagons in a different color as you go across the piece of white cardstock. Once I have those four cut, I'm going to then move my hexagons over, just piecing them in together. I'm going to go way too high up, as you'll see here when I close my Misty door in just a minute, but it does give me a chance to see how my design is looking, and then I can move my hexagons to fit onto my background. So you'll see here, I'm going to close my Misty door and realize only one of those really fits the design, so I'll move them down. Again, it's kind of like stamping with a puzzle. It's really nice that they all fit into each other, and I can also make sure that I don't have the same design next to the stars next to the stars or the solid next to the solid. I have plenty of room to play. So I'll go ahead and ink up the next set of hexagons and get those stamped. Now you definitely could do this singular. You don't have to go through all this work of puzzle piecing them onto the Misty door and stamping, but I just thought it was easy to make sure they were as evenly spaced as possible. And it was just a lot of fun to kind of puzzle piece and move these around the white piece of cardstock and create a fun design. I went from blue to a lighter blue and to a teal color, just taking the hexagons, and you can see here I only have two spaces left, so I'm just going to add them here just by eyeballing them, not really worrying if they're fitting. Again, I'm going to be die cutting these out, so they don't need to be perfect. So I'm going to stamp my last two hexagons here, and then I'm going to clean them all off, put them back in my stamp container, and then we will move on to die cutting. So I'll clean off my desk, as that will be the last of my die cutting for the most part, and we can start assembling this box card together. So I'm going to start with putting my base together. I'm going to just fold on all of these scored lines, and I'm going to use a tape runner to attach these scallop pieces onto the base. So I'm just going to add adhesive to the back of this arch piece, and it fits perfectly on the back side of my box card. So once I get all the adhesive, I'll go ahead and center that and place it onto my card. Next, I'll add adhesive to my rectangle pieces and add them to my two shelf die cuts. So just adding some adhesive to the four sides of my hexagon and adding those. Now I did stamp my stars to try to be all in the same direction, but as I'm applying them to the light blue cardstock pieces, it doesn't really matter yet because they're not glued into my box card. I added the two trapezoid pieces so they are on the outside of the box card. And now let's layer our sentiment together. So I'm taking that white strip where I stamped and using liquid adhesive to adhere that to the teal rectangle piece. It nests perfectly inside, and I could have just left it at that, but I really like the scallops peeking out from behind the rectangle, and it coordinates so well with the scallop box card design. So I like to add in this third layer when I do my sentiments on my box card. And I'm going to make sure that there is a really good adhesion because it is glitter paper and it takes a little time for all of that glue to dry and stick. So now I'm going to fold on the scored pieces of my little shelves, and I'm going to grab some thinner double-sided adhesive. I want to make sure that these are really stuck to the inside of my card, so I'm using a 1/4 inch adhesive. It fits perfectly on these tabs, and that's because this card will be folded closed in an envelope, but the card receiver will probably be moving it around a lot and opening the box card up. So I want to make sure I use really sturdy adhesive for these pieces. So I went ahead and lined up my first shelf to be the front of my box card, and then I lined up my second piece to be in the middle and up a little bit, lining it up with the edge of that side piece, and then I'm folding them over, peeled off the release paper from those, and closing up my box card. And I like to go back and forth and make sure that the box card can open and close in either direction. I'm going for a very simple layout. I'm not being too frilly or overly shiny other than my glitter paper and foiled sentiment, but I wanted to keep this a much more clean and simple look and just keep it fun with the different hexagon shapes on this card. I also love that my cat is orange and really pops off the blues of this card. I added some foam adhesive to the back of my sentiments, and I'm going to attach this first piece to the front of the box card. The scallops actually line up almost perfectly with the design of the first front piece, so that's where I added that one. I went ahead and die cut two more dads out of some white cardstock. I do my foiling on a very thin white cardstock, so I like to add sturdier cardstock on the back when I adhere them to my cards, especially on a box card where it's more interactive and the card receiver might be playing with it a lot more. I really want to make sure my sentiment is stable. I also am going to have it peek up a little bit off the top of my scallop box card, so I want to make sure that it won't rip or tear. I'm going to add foam adhesive to the back side of my dad sentiment, but since it is going to peek off the card just a little bit, I won't go all the way to the top of my dad sentiment with foam adhesive, just more towards the bottom. Once I'm happy with all the foam, I'll go ahead and peel off the release paper, and I'm going to use my grid here on my mat to do my best to get my dad sentiment straight and centered. For the last part of my card is to add my cat. I'm going to add it to the center little shelf piece, but I wanted to add a little bit more stability, so I'm going to die cut out a second white cat, and I'm going to glue it behind my cat once I have my cat glued to my box card. So I'm adding just a little bit of glue to right where they're sitting, and I'm going to adhere them to the middle piece of my box card. Again, doing my best to get them centered, looking at the sentiments and making sure they look even from left to right. Then I'll add adhesive completely over this white die cut piece, and I'm going to slide it behind, and it almost pretty much sandwiches that middle shelf piece in between those two die cut cats. And that will give it lots of stability and keep that cat in place on my box card. Here is a final look at how adorable this hexagon kitty cat dad Father's Day card turned out. I hope you had fun and that you enjoyed my take for the next box card in my series. As you can see, it still will fit in an A2 envelope, even though the sentiment does kind of go a little bit outside of the lines when it comes to the box card shape. Let me know what you think of this box card and if you've been enjoying this series, and let me know what you would like to see on a future box card video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!